do healthcare. And then for Dr. Joe to take on this topics that was still being defined, you know, as we all went through it, and handicap it for us has been, as I look back on it, you know, we were able to make, I think, some good decisions for our families, ourselves, and our businesses, and the people that work for us. And I can't say enough about how much I appreciate it, Dr. Joe. I'm looking forward to what you might have to say today.
Well, Tim, it's been an interesting 13 months since we've been doing this. We've all gone through things that we didn't either anticipate or ever have experienced before. So we've kind of learned together, and it's been a bi-directional exchange of information that's been helpful.
Yeah.
I'm going to kick us off. Sandra and I want to try something. We've done this with a few other groups, but we're going to ask for some audience participation. And if you would, pull your phone out, or if you got two screens, you can do it on your computer. It's probably easiest on your phone. But go open up one of your browsers and go to that website at the top, www.menti.com. menti.com, and it will ask you for a code. We're going to do a little word cloud exercise. It'll ask you for a code 74709890 that you see there at the top. And if when folks are in, you can give me a thumbs up, we'll jump off. And we've done this with a few groups, and it's pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I like it. When Sandra shared it with me, I thought, yeah, that's clever. Let's do that. Okay, code.
And as y'all are getting set up, I just want you to realize it was only like 15 months ago that we had never heard of coronavirus, weren't thinking pandemic, weren't thinking about wearing a mask, weren't going to have an economic challenge that we've been through. People good?
Everybody in?
All right, this is a word cloud, and you see a question there, and you can type in the saying that you've never said before, and you can also watch on the screen so that if you see something somebody else said, you type that in and it gets reinforced and larger. So, think about what is in your vocabulary now that was not in your vocabulary 15 months ago. And I'm going to grab my phone to participate with you. Hang on one second. Is this working for folks?
You're on mute.
So this is just kind of funny. I mean, if you're welcome to do it with any of the groups you're in. It brings you forward a little bit, but it's also, I think, an important time. As we're coming out of this, our community has gone through a hell of a lot of stress. We've got folks that are really, been challenged both with mental health and also substance use issues, people that have lost family members. I think this is at least maybe an innocuous way to recognize how much we have experienced something together and are going forward. Sandra, let's go on to the next question. And I think you have to do we have to do something? Yeah, at the top of your phone, it says the presenters change the slide and you have to go to the next slide for your answers to the end or the bottom.
Okay.
All right, a lot of travel, a lot of contact here that we've not been having. Live music concerts, that's true. That's been.
Bruce's ability to have a race if he was here.
That's right. Competitions. All right, let's do one more if we can, Sandra. And again, if you guys will, when she changes the slide, push at the top to go to the next slide. What are we most worried about? So a lot of appropriate concern about, are we out of this thing yet?
Yeah.
It's good. So Sandra, thank you for setting us up there. Team, I hope that was somewhat interesting to get folks' thoughts on different things. It, you know, in a large group, it really is kind of fun because you get a lot of different perspectives coming in, and then they start resonating with each other. And it's a little risky because you never know exactly where they're going to go, but it does work pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, let me, Tim, if you will, I'm going to share my screen and jump in here. Try to. Can y'all see it now, or do I need to do something different?
Not yet.
Okay.
Don't see it yet.
Yeah, I didn't on my laptop, so I got to get back to you, and I got to share, and then I got to pick it. There we go. I'm getting better at this. It's only been a year.
Here it comes. Yeah.
It's only been a
There
year.
we go. That's right. You're good.
All right, we'll jump in here. You know, we continue to have you know, major challenges in the nation. This is the cumulative total with over 560,000 deaths. I think there is cause for concern here because you do see, you know, here on this, the last few weeks, we're on an uptick in terms of new cases again. And this looks not dissimilar. The next map looks not dissimilar than we were, you know, maybe last April, May, where we have hot spots around the nation. Michigan is probably the one that's gotten the most attention. Connecticut and New York New York State proper have gotten a lot of attention. But we've got Memphis as an emerging hotspot here on our eastern border. We've got Dallas and the remainder of Texas as a hotspot on our southwestern border. And again, so these are, you know, as of yesterday, where reportedly 50% of Americans had had at least, or 50% of eligible Americans had had at least one vaccine. So, I think this is a cause for concern. Just to answer the question up front, I don't think we know now whether these are variants that are the cause for the spread, or whether it is, hesitancy on vaccine uptake and then relaxation of defensive behaviors that we've had. The governor used this slide last week to show what the risk is. The white line here is Michigan. The red line is Arkansas, and you can see back in the early parts of the latter part of 20, early part of 21, Michigan peaked on the 8th of December. We peaked on the 10th of January. We were both in the same place on the 20th of February. And then Michigan kind of lost control. They peaked, hopefully, last week and are coming down. We are at our low point on the 2nd of April and smoldering along. I think the other cause for concern are some of the national numbers. India has just exploded in terms of new cases. You see the green line going up there to about the peak of where we were before. Now, India has, I've forgotten, multiple of populations to what we have. So you would expect them per capita to be higher. We still had the highest per capita of any country ever infected with COVID to date. You also see Brazil in the purple line there that continues at a pretty high caseload, and their per capita rate is the highest, I think, in the world right now, and is really uncontrolled in part because of their political discourse with a leader that doesn't believe in vaccination or in the threat from COVID-19. We do see restrictions in Europe that are concerning. France has entered its third national lockdown first of this month. Spain reintroduced rules on mask wearing. Poland closed non-essential shops, hotels, and the United Kingdom is slowly opening after a long lockdown through January and February. And, effectively international travel to Europe is still effectively offline because of the uncontrolled spread that continues to burden Europe, combined with their vaccine challenges that they've had. We've now had over 10% of our state population that we know have been infected. We have 3 million and some people. We've had 333,000 infections. Probably it's somewhere 2 or 3 times that in terms of the number of people been infected. We are coming down from in a manageable level on our hospitalized individuals and on our ventilators, although we still continue to have daily new hospitalizations. Our testing numbers are down. This is largely because we're not testing anymore. Unless you're symptomatic, few people are receiving tests. So we may be a little bit blind to the upticks that could be occurring in communities across the state. Our hospitalizations have plateaued. Well, our hospitalizations, we had a nadir there the 1st of April, pretty flat, not a dramatic uptake. I will say the hospitalizations that are occurring in younger people. We've vaccinated, well over half of our senior citizens. It's the younger folks now that are bearing the brunt. We had a few days where we had no deaths or low numbers of deaths, but we continue to have, 5 to 10 deaths a day. We've talked before about the long-term effects of the COVID-19. The first bullets you've seen before, the JAMA study of heart damage and heart inflammation in recovered patients, the Big Ten study of athletes, a new study that was published earlier this month that I don't think we've talked about in the Lancet, where they followed about 250,000 people after they had COVID-19, and 1/3 of those patients had new neurologic or psychiatric diagnoses 6 months after their infection. 13% of them, they had never had a neurologic or psychiatric diagnosis before. So 13% had a brand new diagnosis, and then probably another 21% had an additional diagnosis of either a mental health or a neurologic condition. So this is still a virus you do not want to get. Of course, the wild card that we have as we try to get our vaccinations up, the background of our vaccine cards are the jokers with the coronavirus variants. We've got several of concern. The B117 is the one that is most commonly circulating and is prevalent here in the state of Arkansas. It originated in the United Kingdom. The South African variant, the Brazilian variant with a nearly identical sister from Japan, and then 3 US variants. The 117 variant, which is more infectious and studies suggest it has a higher death rate, is the most common variant here in the state, although we also have the Brazilian variant here in the state. And the CDC director has stated on April 7th that now the 117 variant is the most widely circulating type of COVID-19 in the United States. Almost every state, well, every state does have these variants. We know that we have 2 of concern, the 117 and the P1. We probably have others. The health department is just randomly sending about 10 tests periodically to the health department or to the CDC for genetic profiling. So it is likely that with the variants across the number of states and with the travel that we're now having, that we have the other variants or soon will, and a cause for concern there. On the vaccine front, we've got good news, challenging news, and some questions that are outstanding. We continue to have new vaccines developed in phase 1, the safety phase, phase 2, the efficacy phase, and the large scale, tens of thousands of people in phase 3. There have been 5 authorized. That means going through a rigorous scientific process. We have 8 that have been approved. You'll remember that includes the Chinese military vaccine that maybe didn't have the same rigorous process. We've had 4 that have been abandoned. New news is 10 days ago, Pfizer asked the FDA for approval for its vaccine to be administered for children in ages 12 through 15. So some progress there on younger individuals' potential protection. Where we are in Arkansas, for eligible individuals 16 or older, all of which now are eligible, on the left in the teal, the percentage that are fully immunized, we're somewhere between 20 and 25% that are fully immunized. And that means at this point, 2 Moderna, 2 Pfizer plus 2 weeks, or the Janssen plus 2 weeks. We've got another 10% that are partially immunized. That gets us somewhere around a third statewide, which is a good number. Although we are among the laggard states in the nation. Connecticut has 50% of their population vaccinated. We're in the bottom 5 of all 50 states on the percent of our population that is fully vaccinated or that has been vaccinated at all. The supply line is open. We are getting more vaccines than we are able to administer here. So vaccine availability should not be a restriction. It really is vaccine hesitancy now that are causing the delays in uptake. And I think the reality here is people feel that the threat has somewhat abated. The hospitalizations are down. Our lives are getting back to at least a new normal. For some, they are adopting the old normal, but the threat is still present in our communities. And when we think about the vaccines, we're really in a horse race to get everybody vaccinated before the virus has the ability to mutate and our vaccines lose effectiveness against the virus. Right now, the 2 vaccines in Arkansas, Pfizer and Moderna, are highly effective against the B117 strain. They are 4 to 7 times less effective against the Brazilian strain, which is here in the state. They still appear to offer protection against serious outcomes, hospitalization, and death, particularly if you've been fully vaccinated, but they are less effective in preventing infection. So you could be a carrier and be a spreader. Pfizer and Moderna 6 to 8 times less effective against the South African variant. AstraZeneca was much less effective. The Janssen vaccine was also less effective, and then they did do clinical trials in South Africa. Both Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, Pfizer, they're exploring options as these variants mutate of how they can modify their vaccines to try to keep up with the genetic threat that the mutations represent. We have had some adverse reactions reported, very rare, but nevertheless have caused implications for the availability of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It's been placed on pause while the FDA investigates blood clots in 6 recipients, and this is 6 out of over 6 million. So this is a very, very rare condition. You may remember we've had 2 or 3 dozen adverse anaphylactic reactions, no deaths from Pfizer and Moderna. So the rate is about the same. Interestingly, all of the cases were in women between 18 and 48 years of age. It's a blood clot that is formed, and there's been 1 death. I'll come back to this in a moment, but the AstraZeneca vaccine, not approved in the United States, is also on pause. Interesting, the Johnson & Johnson AstraZeneca share a similar technology of using a live attenuated virus that is very different from the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines that use the messenger RNA virus. This is purely speculative on my part, and blood clots have not been observed with Moderna or Pfizer. Purely speculative on my part, but last week the Committee on Immunization Practices met and failed to release the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. If you look at who are affected, women between 18 and 48 years of age, they also, many of them, and this is again purely speculative on my part, they also share another medication that is known to be associated with blood clots, and that's oral contraceptives. And it won't surprise me if they find, a caution on women in oral contraceptive space. They probably won't have statistical power with only 6 people, but there could be an association there. And the ACIP is meeting again on Friday to review an additional set of data. I wouldn't advertise that, but I think the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will be back online for select populations that will help with international and even reaching target populations in the United States. On guidance for fully vaccinated people, I don't think this has changed much. If you're fully vaccinated, and that's defined as 2 weeks after your 2-dose course with Moderna and Pfizer, or the 2 weeks after the single dose for Janssen, you can be with other vaccinated individuals indoors without masks. The grandfather rule, you can vaccinate one household without masks unless they have someone that they have that's high risk, even if they're unvaccinated people, AKA children in that family. If you're exposed, there's no need to isolate or get tested unless you develop symptoms. This is in part the reduction in testing rates that we have. The exception to that is if you're in a group living setting or if you have symptoms. For travel, let's see, what's not changed? Let me go back one. What's not changed is if you're in public or in a crowded space to wear a mask and stay 6 feet apart. As I mentioned, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are highly effective, but there's still a small chance in preventing illness, but there's still a 5% chance you could get infected and become a spreader. So if you're in a large crowd, it's important to maintain the protections. I would say that's also true for indoor spaces, malls, airplane, airports, and so forth. You need to watch for symptoms, especially if you've been around someone that's sick. There have been, 6,000 or so reported reinfections with symptoms of vaccinated individuals. And that's not unexpected. All of our immune systems will respond to the vaccine in different ways. And so that's less than a 0.0001% of people that have been reinfected, but it is possible. So if you have symptoms, get tested and stay home. And obviously, if your workplace has effects in place, we need to continue to respect those and to work together with your colleagues at your place of employment. There are still recommendations to delay travel until you're fully vaccinated, but for fully vaccinated travelers, you don't need to get tested for domestic travel. You don't need to quarantine. Within the transit, however, you should still wear masks, stay 6 feet apart, and recognize that the contact space around you is a potential infectious source. And then obviously recognizing that you have placed yourself at increased risk by traveling, monitor after your travel, and follow all of your local requirements. This is an interesting engineering model that I don't think we've shared with you before. that looked at the effect of ventilation and the importance of optimizing ventilation. This was done for school-based settings where they are here showing an enclosed schoolroom with 9 students, 6 feet apart, that happen to have an infected student. Now, the teacher would not know that that student was infected, or that student would be quarantined and at home. But so any of the 9 could have been infected. In this scenario, it's the one closest to the window. But you see the red are contaminant droplets with the windows closed from the infected students, largely spreading throughout the room. In some areas, coming in contact with students that are close by. Again, knowing that this is gravity impacted, that those that are closer to the infected student without ventilation have more impact. Just by opening up the window and having a little bit of circulation, we can draw that exposure back to be in more proximity to the infected student with more safety for those that are far away. Adding a fan and an air cleaner can even farther reduce this. So, this is a engineering model. It's not the real thing in a real life setting, but I think it does portend for some logical approaches to how risk can be mitigated in the future building design and other efforts that we have to think about while we've all tried to enclose our homes and our businesses for energy efficiency. We may need to have a plan for if we are exposed and need to optimize ventilation in the future. And for those that can now, with the beautiful spring weather we've been having, I would encourage you to do that at present. So, where we are in the middle of April is kind of, as I mentioned, in a horse race between our ability to get people to take the vaccine and to get, a high enough level where the likelihood of you coming in contact with either the original vaccine or one of the variants is low enough so that your vaccination can maintain the protection across the board. And this really is about, using our science and our logic and getting people to take action. This is a cartoon that our team came up with, which is, I think, where we want to get to. We're a far place from that. I'll let you read it on your own, but probably most of us on this phone call have a smallpox vaccine scar, but none of our kids do. And that's because with the science and with the logic and with the action that folks took, because they recognize it as a real threat, we've eliminated smallpox as a threat worldwide. Just to close out, and Kathy, I'm glad you're on the phone with us today, but wanted to let this group know that we are open for Tom Bruce Arkansas Health Impact Award nominations. This is for an individual who has a lifetime of service demonstrated by leadership and sustained effort to improve the health of all Arkansans. We've got an application open on our website through May the 6th. And this group was very successful in lifting up and appropriately nominating with subsequent award to Kathy of the Tom Bruce Lifetime Impact Award last year. So Tim, with that, let me pull out and be glad to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Joe. Questions for Dr. Joe? Sure, you've got a few. Kathy? You get to be Sarah today.
Can you give some straightforward advice about children? I've got a granddaughter playing sports, soccer, and on the soccer field, nobody's wearing a mask. And it just makes me so nervous.
So I think there's no question that children can become infected and can be vectors. And under rare circumstances, they can have severe disease. I think we are lucky in that, for the most part, kids are spared, at least those that, don't have some other immunocompromised situation. This is now all about risk mitigation and logic and balance of risks. In an ideal world, you would have a vaccine that's available for kids, and we're working towards that. Short of that, I think the next best strategy is to have all the adults the kids are around vaccinated, and recognize that we don't have and will not have for a period of time vaccines for kids. And therefore we can't stop their growth and development and their education and their activities. So it really is a risk. It's a risk reward equation that everybody's got to kind of find their own threshold. I think the thing that we don't want to allow to happen is to have people not recognize that there is a risk and that they do need to go through that risk assessment and their balance. Because, what I'm afraid of is people are going to just presume, well, it's over. And I think it's not over. I was talking with, the pastor of my Methodist church who's struggling with how to get as many people back in church and get choir singing and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And he had come up with, phases for reentry. And I told him, I said, I would really suggest that you label those levels of risk because phases of reentry imply it's a one-way street. And we may get to a place where you have to elevate back to a higher level of risk, and you need people to think about what that means. And so, I really do think worst case scenario is people think the risk is over, the tornado siren's blown, the clouds are to the east, and we don't have to worry anymore. And that's not the truth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question, Kathy. Other questions?
So, Joe, I have a question. Tim and I have Tim more than me, but we have some forums that we're facilitating, and we're talking about when we can get together in person again. Typically, these are forums that will have 8 to 12 people in them, if everyone, looking at what you put up there, it's still a little bit risky to getting us all together at this point, it looks like. Would that be the case if everyone were vaccinated?
I think, and again, this is based on CDC guidance. I think if everyone is vaccinated, and we'll come back to that, if everyone is vaccinated, I think you can get together. I think there are steps that you can take as you get together. Your venue, if it's large enough where you can space folks apart, if it's, you think about having, hand sanitizer and stuff present. If you, again, back to what we just talked about with Kathy's question, if you recognize the risk is not zero and you put some defensive mechanisms in, and folks have taken the offensive approach of getting vaccinated, the CDC guidance is that small groups can come together and even be unmasked. I would, y'all got some, if you were doing it in April or May, you might think about doing it at one of your outside pavilions so that you maximize your ventilation. But yeah, I think you're at a place where you can start to think about that. You might have to pull the ripcord if something explodes on us and you don't, things reverse from where they are. I think the bigger challenge is, are you going to require proof of vaccination? And I think that's what folks are struggling with in all venues right now. I think, it's the cruise ships, at least publicly, say they're going to require proof of vaccination so that they can get back in business without the threat of risk. Now, the CDC doesn't quite trust that they're going to do that. So, you're going to have to come up with a process, I think, or at least have an honor system. I told my mom once, I think I've shared this with you, she's chomping to get her bridge club back together. And I said, I'm fine with you getting your bridge club back together as long as the first card on the table is vaccine cards. So I think y'all got to figure out the tolerance for, that requirement of your membership and your trust that they will either tell you or that you will verify. And then if you don't want to go that far, there could be an honor system that you come together, but either you're going to all wear masks for the potential that somebody's not vaccinated, or as what UAMS does or has done with the flu vaccine now for years, you're either vaccinated or you're wearing a mask all the time that you're present, so that you don't have to be vaccinated, but you have to take precautions to not put other people at risk.
Yeah, and that's a stance some of the CO Forum members have taken. If you're not, pretty clear.
But I think, Ed, to your question, as long as we're in this low transmission rate, as long as yeah, I mean, the CDC guidance is if everybody, okay, and everybody, I mean, you can cite their guidance. It's pretty clear. If everybody is vaccinated, then with appropriate precautions, you can come together and be unmasked. You got that if in there, and that's the thing that you got to pay attention to.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
I have a quick question.
You bet.
Dr. Joe.
You
When
bet.
when you say like there's a hot spot somewhere, like what's considered a hot spot? Like what would we have to do to all of a sudden it be concerning that we have a hot spot?
Yeah.
So, great question. And the backing up from kind of the hard indicators, and Michigan is experiencing this, is when they're just having a rapidly increasing number of hospitalizations and after hospitalizations deaths each day. So they're out of control on the spread of the virus, for which, you know, as we've talked about some before, probably 95% of people never need hospitalization. So if you're having a large number of hospitalizations, you're even having a larger number of infections happening out in the community. And with this virus, it spreads so easily, and the variants appear to spread so much more quickly. You know, if you have one person today that infects 3 tomorrow, that infects 9 the next day, that infects 81 the next, suddenly you're out of control again, and you threaten your hospitals and your communities, and then you have to be forced to going back into the shutdown.
Mhm.
Now, indicators before hospitalization that we would like to have are how many tests that are being done are positive. And the threshold there, if you're testing a lot of people, you know, has been, you know, the concerning threshold is 5%, the alarm threshold is 10, but you got to be testing a lot of people. And right now we're not testing, I mean, we're not testing 10,000 people. And so we don't have line of sight there on that positivity rate. And it's the hospitalization rate that I'm watching right now, at least within the state here.
Okay, thanks.
What about hospitalization rate you just said, Dr. Joe?
That's what I mean, I think that is our indicator. If we start to see that go up, we should know that, you know, we need to increase our testing. We need to recognize that we're losing some ground. And again, because this thing spreads so fast, it's not one person to one person to one person. It's exponential. When it starts spreading, it gets out of control quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and more contagious on the new variant. So,
right.
So you said, you know, it's a horse race. We want to get it, what kind of put to bed before it mutating. Can you go into that a little more, what all that means, and then you know, length of time, those kind of things?
Sure. So this virus is an RNA virus. Without going into too much microbiology, it does not have the ability when it gets a mutation to repair itself. So it changes. Some of those changes make it less infectious or less deadly. We don't worry about those changes. Some of the changes make it more infectious and or more deadly, and those are the variants of concern. And so every time it spreads from one person to the next person, it has the chance to have one of those mutations. And so if we don't stop the spread person to person, as long as we continue to have this thing smolder along, spreading, you know, even at a low rate, the chance for a mutation to happen and create they call it a variant, but it's really a new type of the COVID-19 virus. That new type might have a profile for which our vaccines don't work anymore.
Okay, yeah.
And once you get to a variant that our vaccines don't work, then we're spreading again, just like we were just talking about, with no protection.
At a faster pace than prior COVID, right? Yeah. More contagious, right? Yeah.
More contagious, and importantly, you know, we've got a window here, and this is that horse race. We want to get up to 70 or 80% vaccination rates so that the spread doesn't happen. And we're just not moving towards that in our state.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, last week in the governor's comments, I felt was a little more anxious than usual. In my comments with the health department this week, our trend line is not continuing to go down. It's not racing up like Michigan, but we don't we're not on that downward slope that we enjoyed,
Yeah.
in March and April. And we'll see what is relayed this afternoon. But I think vaccine hesitancy and of course the Johnson & Johnson blood clot concern doesn't help. And it still is a risk out there that if this thing just smolders along, we'll end up with, at some point in the future, a variant that mutates that our vaccines don't cover anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start having the potential to slide back where we were before.
And that's a much bigger risk than taking the vaccine, right?
I read this last night. The chance, if everybody got in a car and if everybody got a vaccine today, the chance of getting killed in a car wreck is 100 times greater than the chance of having a reaction to the vaccine. And everybody, I'm pretty sure, is getting in a car today, but we can't get people to take the vaccine today.
So it's 100x benefit, everybody.
Every day.
Almost, Yeah, wow. That's a great analogy. Well, any other questions, please?
Thank y'all for having me. I know we got a smaller group. Keep the conversation going among your circles. I'm hopeful that we stay low and our vaccine uptake remains high. I do think this is almost like, I use the term joker in a deck of cards intentionally. I think it's what you get dealt. I think Michigan got dealt a bad hand. We got dealt a good hand here, but when we reshuffle the cards and deal again, the joker's in there, and it's popping. The spread over in Memphis, that heat map looks just like it did last April, with Memphis popping up and other parts of the country being really red.
Yeah, kind of that early wave, kind of. Yeah. Well, it feels to me like there's plenty of risk out there. Yes, sir. Jay?
I got a quick question for Dr. Thompson. Do you have any best practices or just self-knowledge of what's the best way to convince the vaccine hesitant people, especially in the rural communities, to encourage them to take the shot? What would be the best messaging to help that happen? Because I don't think we're going to fully recover until we have that 70-80% vaccination rate statewide.
Yeah, what I have found, and again, this is, I still find somebody every week who does not believe this is actually even real. So I think the first step is you just have to meet people where they are. What is it that they either understand or are afraid of or have heard? And what I find is most folks, if you talk about, who they know that have had it, who they know that it still may have symptoms from it, what families they know that have lost somebody, you can get them into a conversation about that it is real and that we do have mechanisms, and that, the vaccine, particularly the Pfizer and Moderna, aren't even part of the virus. So it actually is, and that example of giving, and again, this works for me with a little more conservative, groups, giving your immune system the FBI most wanted list, know what to watch for. Get it into a police you want your body monitoring for the villain. That has tended to work. There is another group, and this is not limited to the rural parts of the state or the more isolated parts of the state, but in the religious space, run across folks that are either more fatalistic or maybe more resistant to scientific advances. And what I have found works there is that, this virus is something that is, if not evil, at least damaging to us as individuals. And that, God gave individuals the knowledge to create the vaccine, the clinical, foresight to know how to deliver the vaccine. And that, it's I believe personally that God intends us to take care of our bodies as much as we can. And this is an active step that we can do to do that. So that ends up actually, I find, particularly if it's in a one-on-one situation or in a trusted group situation, you can at least get people to revisit their previous decisions.
Is there some strategic, I'm sorry, is there some
Meeting
strategic
where they are, giving them accurate information and asking them to, think about it a little bit is our best way of moving folks along.
Yeah.
Is there some strategic outreach to those ministers, the people in the ministerial community? Because I think you're right, they're hugely influential, and
Yeah, I think there is. I think, candidly finding both lay and clergy that are concerned. And again, that's, the power of the pulpit's pretty strong, but also the separation of church and state is probably even stronger. So,
right. Well, that's arguable these days.
And then Jay, you got a great point there. It's hard to get to and message the audience you're looking to message to some degree, obviously.
I do think, and again, for you as community leaders and probably, faith participants, even you reaching out to your pastor and saying, how can we help you reach to other faith leaders in the community so that y'all can be a power in this? I mean, any of the stuff we have, I'm glad to share. I'm glad to, do something with a group of faith leaders. We've done a little bit of that here in Central Arkansas. I've met with some African-American ministers in El Dorado. I think we're in a different place. I mean, when it was shut everything down, there was a reaction to that of we need to draw our membership in and support them. Now that we're in kind of let's open back up, I think there's a little bit new conversation that needs to have of how can we safeguard, your flock as opposed to just maintain your flock. Yeah, we need to be proactive, don't we? Yeah, Jay, you gonna say something or ask a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I really get this sense that the economy is really getting ready to take off, but it will only fully do so if we reach that vaccination threshold. So I was just curious if there's a messaging like, the faster everyone gets vaccinated, the faster this economy is going to start humming full throttle again. So, help us get back to full throttle. Don't be the delay. Don't be the cause to slow it down.
Jay, I think that's a great message for some audiences. I think the challenge is for a lot of folks, the economy is back at full throttle and they think everything's normal.
Okay.
I mean, for those businesses that are still impacted, and you've got some in this forum, there are others across the state, that really resonates. But for a lot of Arkansans, they see Home Depot busting out and, construction going full throttle and, restaurants booming again. And it's hard to say the economy is not back at full throttle with a lot of what people see.
Okay.
Yep. Well said. Well said.
So can I ask one more quick question? What is your take on this when you're reading news about like reinfection after getting vaccinated and all that?
So earlier this week, last week, because we see it in the data that we get from the health department, there are a few hundred people in Arkansas that have been vaccinated that subsequently have a positive test. Now, if you get a test soon after you're vaccinated, that may be a false positive because you still are carrying what the test assesses for. But I think we are seeing people that are reinfected long after they have been vaccinated. Now let's separate infected from becoming symptomatic and symptomatic from becoming really sick. Okay, when we say the vaccines are 95% effective, that means they're 95% effective against you from becoming infected, okay, that first level. Mm-hmm. But that also means 5% is not effective. So of people that are vaccinated, a small number have the potential to get reinfected. It appears that the vaccines are much more able to keep you from becoming symptomatic and almost universally able to keep you from getting hospitalized. So it keeps you from getting sick, but you could still become reinfected. And that's where the herd immunity comes in. We've got to get the protection in the community high enough so that, if the protection in the community were at 70%, then that 5% exposure doesn't happen very often. And then we start to shut this thing down. And that's where the two things work together: the individual uptake of vaccine and then the community protection, because you have so many people that have had the vaccine. It starts working together to really put a blanket on what we've had as a forest fire. I think the analogy, I used it last week with the Chamber of Commerce call, I kind of made it up on the fly, but it seemed to work. We've been in a forest fire that we've gotten some control over, and it's starting to look better, but we're still holding a can of gasoline in our hand. And if we're not careful and get this thing out, that gasoline can flare up on us pretty easily.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it could flare up. Yeah, great question, Diane. Great question. Other questions?
All right. Well, thank you all for having me. Again, think about our Tom Bruce nominations, Kathy.
Yeah.
We will showcase you hopefully in person this year and look forward to that.
Yeah, and Dr. Joe, you and I'll talk further, but I'm not sure we did an effective job on our marketing. Plus, people can know our habits, so they can go wait and go to the YouTube.
All right.
So we'll chat and see what you want to do next, and sure hope you continue your public service, maybe upstream and maybe in the state or something. I don't know, but look forward to that. But
Tim, thank you for your support and your hospitality and your broader group's participation. I think it's been a invaluable kind of bi-directional flow of information, and we'll do it again when we need to do it again. Okay?
Well, thank you. Let's all disseminate this. So this is an important one. We're not out of this, everybody. So, let's all play offense against this opportunity we have.
Great.
Against the risk and with the opportunity. Thank you all. Dr.
Thank
Joe,
you.
thank you.
Bye.